you're not always going to have this super efficient Drew Holiday game. The Jays aren't always going to combine for 61. We saw last postseason when that Horford 3 disappears, it's a backbreaker. Every one of his missed threes were backbreaking misses where, thank God it didn't, but those are the types of misses that spark runs on the other end.
Celtics Beat is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Evan Valenti is well caffeinated. I am well dressed. If you are watching here on YouTube, the CLNS Media channel, I'm usually not, so I feel like I need to call attention to it. With Ev, I'm Adam Kaufman. Dan Greenberg is here. Barstool Greeny is likely how you know him. And look, we wanted to make sure we got a show in before the end of the week, before Game 4, as the Celtics look to win another and maybe two more in a row to close out the Cleveland Cavaliers. Not all series are built the same. Not all series are created differently. And there is a reason why, and forgive me if you've heard me say this elsewhere, first time on this pod though, when the Bruins, who just lost again to the Florida Panthers, when they were even at 1 after 2 games against Florida, and the Celtics were even against Cleveland at 1, I looked at those two series very differently. I said the Florida Panthers probably going to win this series. The Celtics, please. There is no problem. There is no concern whatsoever. This is just like when Boston, that Game 2 stinker against Miami. This is of no concern against the Cavaliers because Donovan Mitchell, he cannot do it himself. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Let's go to the conference finals. I'm dressed for the funeral here, Ev. That's what I'm doing. The Cavaliers funeral. Greeny, how are you, bud?
Well, for the sake of the Celtics playoff run, I'm going to have to disagree with you there and respect the basketball gods and say there is always concern. Nothing is ever given. They still have a long way to go. Let's not tempt the fate and just be happy they took care of business in Game 3, but it's an entirely different matzo ball in Game 4. So, it's certainly not, the series is not over. So I would advise us to not treat it that way at this moment in time. That's all.
I appreciate the superstition and like you said, not tempting the basketball gods. And look, I mean, injuries happen and God forbid, but that's what it would take for Cleveland to win this series in my mind. And I think this is a good place to start, not with injuries, but about looking at the other side and, what does Cleveland have to do? I mean, we want to talk gambling. I took the Celtics to win Game 3 and cover, and I will likely do so for Game 4 as well. You're looking at a similar 8.5 point spread. And I just thought Boston and Jason Tatum in particular, after Game 2, were going to come out pissed off and ready to show something. They did that in Game 3. I feel just as strongly in Game 4 they want to show that the Cavaliers are not an appropriate challenge to them. We were talking off air before we started the show about, and I know, Ev, you have some strong thoughts about sort of what makes up a good performance, what doesn't, some of the Twitter vitriol and spewing that has been going on that app over the course of the last few days here as it relates to Tatum in this series in general. Anthony Edwards, as he tries to lead the Timberwolves back against the Nuggets right now as we talk, and it's likely not going to happen. Time's running out in that game, so assume it's a 2-2 series, especially if you're listening after the fact, in the morning or something like that. He's having a great game, but he can't do it alone. And Joe Mazzulla, head coach of the Celtics, said back in round 1, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, if Miami is, our approach against Miami is make Bam Adebayo beat us. We don't care if Bam scores 50 points. It's the other guys, all the shooters that we're trying to shut down. And he effectively sort of said the same thing about Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell's going to get his and let him. It's the other guys that we need to stifle. And I think last night was a great example of that. Donovan Mitchell hit roughly 95 3-pointers and had a whole bunch of points. And yet it wasn't enough because, again, the supporting cast wasn't enough. And it's just a reminder of the gigantic, even absent Kristaps Porzingis, talent gap that exists between these two teams.
There's no question. Donovan Mitchell, I just got a feel for that guy. He's unbelievable. If you're one of these teams that's circling the Cleveland Cavaliers as we head into the offseason and Donovan's looking for potentially a new team, if I were any team trying to make the playoffs, I'd want Donovan Mitchell on my team. The guy is a certified absolute stud in the playoffs. I mean, there's no question about it. He's just going up against a team that has way more talent than his team does at the current moment. And that's Evan Mobley has shown me something a little bit last couple of games. Been very impressed. Games 2 and 3's come out, although, maybe not so much in game 3, but he's a little at least more assertive in that role. But it's the other guys. Like it's Karis LeVert. It's Max Strus. It's Dean Wade. It's even, everybody loves him. And I know it's been a little bit of a weird thing, but Darius Garland has not impressed me as much. Like it's just the other guys that aren't up to snuff. And, I just feel like they're not comfortable. Those guys aren't comfortable stepping into the limelight. Meanwhile, Greeny, you tweeted this out today. Pritchard's huge shot in the third quarter of game 3. Like, does anybody on Cleveland's bench have the gumption to take that shot? No. Meanwhile, Peyton Pritchard, who spent a lot of time on the bench last year, didn't see any playoff action. This season has been unbelievable. He's been great as a role player and hit maybe the biggest shot of game 3 in that game, pulling up from the logo. So as much as I just tipped the cap to Donovan Mitchell. The guy's unbelievable. He's picking on everybody, whether it's White or Holiday, or he's killing Al Horford, which I hope we talk about at some point. He's putting everybody in a tough spot and hitting a bunch of threes and getting to the rack, and he's awesome. But this is what we've been saying. It's not about Greeny. It's not about player versus player. It's not like, oh, Donovan Mitchell is the best player in the series. Well, guess what? Even if he is, players 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all play for the Celtics, and that's impossible to overcome at this point.
Yeah, the formula is pretty simple. It's no different for Cleveland as it was for Miami, as it will be for whoever they might face down the road. To beat the Celtics, you need to have high volume threes. You need to have multiple guys making threes. You need the Celtics to be below their season average, 30% below. And you need a guy like Mitchell, whoever your number one is, to be an efficient 30 to 35 points, right? If you look back, game 2 against Miami, that was the 23 threes over 50%. Game 2 against Cleveland, only 13 threes, but they were high 40s, I think 46%. If the Celtics are going to make their threes at a 34% clip, you can't fall behind in the basketball math. So where it gets dangerous is against Bam. It's like, okay, Bam, kill us with twos, take all the shots you want. You can't really have that same approach with Mitchell because he can make 8, 9 threes in a game if you let him. So I'm still wary of, last night the others on Cleveland didn't deliver, but it's just as likely for me to envision them making their open corner threes. So it's like the Celtics can't just not show up defensively and say, hey, others, like, go ahead, try to beat us. Like, it requires them to be locked in. But if you're not getting that consistent secondary scoring, especially from behind the arc, you're just not going to be able to produce the point total, because the Celtics are probably going to flirt with, on average, 108, 110. Like, you have to be able to consistently make threes at an acceptable clip just to be able to overcome that.
Injury report is out for game 4. Kristaps Porzingis expectedly has been ruled out. And, people have been talking about, is he going to come back for this series? Like we had the Steve Bulpett tweet, and I'm paraphrasing, saying that the Cavaliers expect to see him before the end of the series. And the vibes are from the Celtics sort of feeling the same way. My feeling on that is basically wake me when he's listed as questionable on the injury report. As soon as he's, that point in time, I'll take it seriously. But everything else, like Luke Cornett, probable. We know what the Celtics are going to look like. The Cleveland one, I consider interesting day to day. Not on the Donovan Mitchell picture. Like, he was listed as questionable for game 4. Sure. Like there's any realm of possibility that Mitchell's going to miss this game. But Jarrett Allen, every game it's will he, won't he? In terms of obviously getting back out there on the floor, he's would like to play through the injury, and each day the news is coming out closer and closer to game time. To all right, early morning shoot around, he's present, he's not present, okay, he's not going to play. And then we get, well, mid-afternoon, okay, he's not going to play. All right, right before tip-off, okay, he's not going to play. And so it just feels like, I feel like anyway, game 4 is the time. I think Allen is coming back. So I don't know if you agree, but if you do, what does that do to the dynamic for this team in terms of, we know it'll be a limited workload, restricted minutes. Bickerstaff has already alluded to that when he was talking about his availability for game 3. But, in terms of Mobley, like Ev said, Mobley's showing me something. Well, Mobley, who got a little dinged up in the last game, by the way, he's going to be looked at in a different way, both in terms of rebounding the basketball, scoring the basketball. I mean, Allen has the ability, maybe not in this first game, but has the ability in general to be a force. Does the strategy offensively change at all for Cleveland if he is available?
I mean, I think so, right? I mean, because if you have him on the floor, you're removing, in theory, one of your perimeter shooters, whether that's Strus or Okoro, something like that. So I imagine it's not going to be Okoro because they need him for the wing defense. So if you're subbing out Max Strus, while he has struggled, we all know what a Max Strus random outlier playoff game can turn into. So I think in that instance, it helps you. Where I think it makes things a little bit more difficult for the Celtics is their pick and roll defense has been atrocious, and you're adding an elite level roll man to now have to deal with, right? So whether that's 2-man game with Mitchell and Allen or Garland and Allen, I fear, just because we just have not seen them guard the pick and roll with any sort of legitimate success. And if you don't have Porzingis, I think you see a lot more stuff like that. You're going to see offensive rebound issues, plays at the rim. I mean, Jalen and Tatum got to the rim so effortlessly with zero resistance in game 3. That doesn't exist if Jarrett Allen's there in game 4. So it's a trade-off between lowering your probability that you're going to be burned from 3 while also presenting new challenges when it comes to pick and roll, offensive rebounds, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the trade-off favors anybody. You know what I mean? It's almost like a wait and see sort of thing, where and I hate to pick on Al, but like Al, when he gets put into space against Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, etc., he's getting killed. I mean, the game 3 was not pretty for him. I almost feel like bringing Jarrett Allen back into the fold might actually help Al a little bit to stay on the floor a little better and keep up with everybody. Meanwhile, you take that 3-point shooting threat off the floor for the Cavs, and now the math problem game that I mentioned that Miami was going to have and that Cleveland's going to have, the math gets a little harder to math if you're going to add a non-shooter out there playing big minutes. I wouldn't expect Jarrett Allen to play big minutes if he plays in this series at all. I just don't think he's going to have the legs, especially with that injury, that would come back and deal with the physicality of playoff basketball. It's going to be really hard to do. If I'm Boston, I'm probably going at him a ton just to test him out, But I don't know if that favors anybody, him coming back out. I think that if you're JB Bickerstaff, see what it looks like and see how he moves, how the offense moves. Obviously, the offensive rebound and the rebounding in general will improve for Cleveland as long as he's kind of on the floor. But I'm not sure if I'm willing to take that trade off. And if I'm Joe Mazzulla, it's like, okay, like if you're going to play one big at a time, we can kind of hang with that. We can space out the Cornets and the Tillmans and the Horfords and the whatever we want to do here. Meanwhile, Cleveland's going to be playing with a pretty dinged up roster right now. I mean, you saw Mobley a little hobbled, Donovan's a little hobbled, and Allen coming back in the fold isn't 100%. So it's just not ideal. You got to be clicking on all cylinders to beat the Celtics, especially if you're Cleveland. You need everybody playing healthy, and I just don't know if that's going to be the case here. As we get closer to game 4, we'll find out. But if Allen plays, if I'm a Celtics fan or if I'm on the Celtics, I'm really not sweating it. It's like, all right, well, it's a different math problem to solve, but it's going to be pretty easy for us.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they started at double big, right? Just because in that instance, now you have Mobley in space having to guard Tatum on the perimeter. It's much easier for him to just not really, all you have to worry about with Al Horford is just pick and pop threes, right? Now, if you have Mobley in space, you're increasing his chance of picking up early fouls. You're just, you don't have that same sort of floor spacing because now you have 2 non-3-point shooters on the court. So even if Allen is active, it wouldn't shock me if they keep it one big just in this specific matchup because of the spacing and the shooting that, the Celtics do have.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so easy to play. I can make my Celtic picks and make my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals and easy gameplay and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Celtics and NBA fans, you can get in on Prize Picks in 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. On Prize Picks this week, I'm selecting Jason Tatum to dish out more than 5 assists and his teammate Jaylen Brown to have more than 22.5 points. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
Greeny, look, you said you don't want to pick on Al Horford. I'll pick on Al Horford, but not for a reason that's his fault. I think the most glaring problem, and we talked about this, at the time that it happened, you could see this coming. The most glaring issue with the Kristaps Porzingis injury, and all due respect to like Luke Cornett, who has looked, I think, exceeded a lot of people's expectations. We've even seen Tillman out there getting a little bit of run, but in Game 3 in particular, when Mazzulla leaned more into his starting lineup than he typically does, knowing it was not a must win, but maybe in his mind it was viewed as something as a must win. He's a little bit of a psychopath. Horford played 39 minutes and he looked old. I mean, Horford, it wasn't, there are some guys that just have bad nights. I don't think Horford had a quote unquote bad night. I think Horford had an old night. I think Horford looked the way he looked against Miami much of that series last year, when he just looked out of gas at the end and he couldn't hit an open shot. He went 0 for 6 from 3. Most of those were wide open looks and he just couldn't connect. And I know you could look at him and say, that's an outlier. That's not going to repeat itself. Well, you know what? If he's playing damn near 40 minutes, it's absolutely going to repeat itself. But he's just not built to handle that anymore at this advanced basketball age. If you want to keep him in the mid-20s where he should be and spray some other bigs out there, great. You have the chance to get the best of Horford. But we have seen his numbers in this series. In fact, the last 4 going back to the clincher against Miami, 23, 27, 29, 39. That cannot happen. Can't happen.
Yeah, I think he's 31% from 3 this playoffs. He was in the low 30s last playoffs.
22% in this series.
Oh, right. So that's why Porzingis is so important, right? Because for the Celtics offense to work, you need that safety valve, pick and pop 3-point shooter. I just, it's like he's my age. I can't in good conscience be like, hey, Al Horford, stay in front of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell when you've only had a game in between or a day in between and you're playing 38 minutes. It's like there were some moments late. He had some good challenging contests on the vert in the fourth quarter. So it's like, I can understand why you have him out there because, I'm not sold at Xavier Tillman guarding any of these guys in space. I don't think there's that much of a difference just because of how quick the Cavs guards are. But it's like, at the very minimum, I need you to make your open corner threes. That's where it gets into trouble because you're not always going to have this super efficient Drew Holiday game. The Jays aren't always going to combine for 61. We saw last postseason when that Horford 3 disappears, it's a backbreaker. Every one of his missed threes were backbreaking misses where, thank God it didn't, but those are the types of misses that spark runs on the other end. So I'm nervous about it, but I also want to be rational and be like, he's playing 38 minutes as a 37-year-old. He's not LeBron, he's allowed to act.
But that's why I said I'm picking on him for something that's not his fault. He can't control how old he is, and he can't control how much he's out there. This is on Joe. You got to do something differently.
I know. I just don't know, because if you play Cornette, then you have to over-rely on drop coverage, which is a death sentence. And I don't know. I just feel like in my brain, I remember Xavier Tillman just really struggling in space in Game 2. And I think maybe that's the trade-off. You say, hey, roll the dice. If it means you can buy Horford 10 more minutes of rest, and he's not getting stops on switches anyways. So what's the difference? But I don't know. I just the way that Joe has not played Tillman down the stretch of the season and then so far in the playoffs tells me there's some sort of trust factor there that just does not exist because this is why they traded for him, right? Like to give their guys, especially Al, breathers if Porzingis goes down. And here we are. And maybe it's because it was game 3. Like maybe now that they're up 2-1, he'll be more willing to do it. And he just didn't want to screw around in a, tied series. But I'm with you. They have to do what they can to help Al just recharge. And if they don't, it's going to keep happening.
I think the answer is, I think you got it at the end of game 3, about a minute to go. Jared Weiss pointed this out. Shout out to Jared. The answer is play Tatum at the 5 because Evan Mobley is not an overpowering big. He's not overly physical. He's not going to bang and push Tatum out of the way. Tatum is exceptional at boxing guys out. And I think what got lost a little bit is, like, I know he had double-digit rebounds in game 3. You're missing all the tip outs he had that other guys got credit for rebounds because, like, he was active on the glass on both ends. And if he's going to rebound like that against a guy in Mobley who's easy to push around, then having Tatum at your 5 and having 4 guys around him that can shoot threes, whether it's Pritchard or Hauser or however you want to do it, it's obviously Jalen, Jason, White, a Holiday, and pick your 5th guy. And Pritchard has earned some quality minutes. I think Hauser, if you want to play a little bit bigger, he can help you there. But, unless the game's really out of reach, if you want to keep it, if you're trying to execute well down the stretch, I think Tatum at the 5 is fine here, especially if Jarrett Allen's not playing. Like, if Allen's not playing, then Tatum can absolutely push Mobley around. I'm not sweating that. So it's going to be one of these things where I am looking towards the future, and I'm much like you guys. Saw Al last year in Miami. Can't have that. He just can't have it. Like, he's got to make those open threes. Those are, because they're open, they're wide open, and other team's going to concede that. And if they're going to concede that and he's missing them, it's going to be a problem. Like, if you go back and look at some of the things the Celtics did defensively in game 3, they left certain guys wide ass open. I mean, wide open. It was like, yeah, you know what? Hey, Isaac Okoro, yeah, you can take that shot. That's fine. We're going to live with that. Hey, Dean Wade, which drove me slightly nuts after the game he had earlier this year. Like, hey, Dean,
and then he made his first 3.
Yeah, like, hey, Dean, go right ahead. Get up, get after it. Like, they're leaving some guys open. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't. This flip side is also in the Celtics. Like, if they're going to leave Al wide open, you have to punish them for that. Like, that's what makes this team so great, is like, oh, yeah, there's just Al Horford in the corner over there, and he's actually adept at that shot. So you're going to have to cover that. And if you go out and cover that, then they can attack the rim and all that other stuff. So Al is vital. Like, Al is hugely important in the success of this team this season. They're relying on him too much in a series that I don't know if he's quite built for this at his stage in his career, right? Earlier, sure. Now, not so much. You have to preserve him the best you can. I've been arguing for Warren Tillman minutes. To Greeny's point, they weren't spectacular, but I'm willing to roll the dice because the flip side is Al is exhausted, and you wore him out before you got to the NBA Finals, and that can't happen.
Yeah, it's so what's not frustrating, but you're just like, it makes you just so annoyed is he's like right there. Like on these drives when he contests it, it's like a 34-year-old Al Horford contests that shot or blocks it. But like father time. I mean, that's the natural human regression. And I just think this is why they traded for Porzingis, because Brad clearly saw that as the playoffs went on and as Al is forced to play every other day, his three-point shot evaporates. And sneaky, if you look at the top 6 shooters on this team, 4 of them are shooting under 34% from 3. So it's not like, all right, well, Horford's struggling from 3, but hey, Tatum is 38%, Jalen's 38%, Pritchard's 39%. They're all under 35%. So it's like your shooters aren't shooting and your safety valve can't make a shot right now. That's the type of recipe for disaster that can happen if you just have an off night defensively.
Remember Al last year? Al Horford was like the second most efficient 3-point shooter in the league last year, behind Malcolm Brogdon, and both those guys just didn't have the postseason you wanted. You got to avoid that this year. Again, Al being a 40% 3-point shooter for the year, like that's a huge advantage that your 5th or 6th guy can hit threes at a 40% clip. Now, playoff defenses are a little bit more difficult, obviously, but Are they sometimes because they're leaving Al wide open? Maybe not.
Right.
But again, this is something they have to punish teams for. And if they can't, it's going to run into some trouble.
And I don't even need 40%. I think you just need a respectable league average. Just you can't be 22%. I think is the bigger takeaway. You don't have to be 40, but you can't be 22.
Let's talk a little Tatum on and off the floor. And I know you guys both have thoughts, obviously, on what we've seen, what we've heard in recent days. Now, I know he's sort of, it'd be too strong to say come under fire, but he has been criticized a little bit for some of what some might refer to as playing the victim card to some degree. Like ask the question about, do you believe you have a super team? And he talks about how, we don't have the MVP, we only have 2 all-stars, we blah 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 blah, when other people would probably prefer that he just come out and answer the question like an alpha, like, who cares whether or not we have a super team? We believe we are the better team and we intend to win this series. Like, how much would we love Jason Tatum to say something like that? I think the bigger issue here, and again, it's not really an issue, but I'll just use that word, is this is just kind of who he is in front of the media. Not to say he hasn't given many good interviews. He absolutely has, especially when he's away from the media and doing podcasts and things like that, like when he's been on with, Reddick in the past. But I think that he is, sometimes what he says gets lost in the delivery, in the fact that he's very soft-spoken, that you don't hear a lot of conviction in the way that he speaks, even if it is there. It's just, it doesn't present itself. Where he's the alpha, though, is on the floor. And it was nice to see, and we know he's capable of it, such an aggressive Jason Tatum in Game 3, where he goes for 30-plus points. You knew, like I mentioned gambling earlier, like safest bet on the board last night outside of the Celtics covering was that Tatum was going to double-double. You knew that he was going to have double-digit rebounds again. He has been attacking the glass like a madman. A mostly efficient shooting night, 11 of 25, wasn't good from 3. Hit all his free throws, though, which, I know we all believe is incredibly important. And, put out a lot of assists as well. The turnovers, pretty much offset the dimes. But even still, it was a strong night for Tatum. Now, was he the team's leading scorer in a win? Yes. But did he have to be? No. Because, again, Brown was great. Holiday was awesome offensively for the first time, really, in these playoffs. We can talk about him in a little bit. But I expect to see more of this from Tatum, and these stretches come, be it during the regular season or the playoffs, where he, in a way, gets called out and then responds, not in the way people always love in the media, but on the floor in kind. And I think you're going to see a couple of these Tatum games before he maybe gets a little more passive, kind of takes a back seat. And then it's going to happen again in the next series where he's going to show up with a couple of these big performances.
Yeah, I just think the Tatum discourse is the stupidest thing that we have on the internet and in basketball discourse in general. I just think it's so moronic. It's like people pretend like he doesn't have this dog or he can't be this guy. And you can do that if you just ignore all the times that he comes through on the road in big playoff games. Like, so what? Because he like dunked and flexed and screamed, does he all of a sudden have like the dog mentality or the winning it factor? Like, it's all just so stupid. And I think what the result of that is just we're all just waiting for that next step, right? Like, we've seen him dominate through playoff runs before, whereas with other stars around the league, it's still so new. You're seeing it for the first time. I think with Tatum, this is his 100th playoff game, and he's one of 8 or 9 guys to have 25, 10, and 5 games in the playoffs, like just in terms of his total. The only way any of this stops is if you win a title. We knew that heading into the season. We knew that throughout the regular season. That was true in the first round, and it's true now. Like, no matter what he does, it's going to be scrutinized, whether it's good. Like last night, he was sensational. He was 9 of 18 through 3 quarters, but he's getting killed for being 11-25, right? So nobody even cares that he completely controlled the game in a road win with basically like the season arguably on the line. None of that matters. When they lose, it's, oh, he's a fraud. He's not a number 1. He's soft. Like, there is no winning this argument unless he wins the title. And to me, that's the ultimate sign of respect. That's how you know he makes it, right? Like there will be people today, I'm sure, that will make excuses for Jalen Brunson for losing these 2 games in Indiana and struggling from the floor. They'll make excuses for Anthony Edwards for dropping these 2 home games and letting the Nuggets back in their series because they're new and they're exciting and they've played well. Tatum has been, very good in a sense of impact, but not in a sense of shooting. And I think that's the easy thing for people to identify, which is why has this perception like he hasn't been good or isn't a top dog. And it's just also freaking stupid because you watch a game like last night and you can tell even in the possessions where he wasn't shooting the ball, how much he controlled the game. And that is what a number one needs to do on the road in the playoffs, right? If he had come and scored 40 points and the Celtics lost, is he a dog and a number one? No, he's going to get killed for losing 2 out of 3 to a lower seed. And it baffles my mind.
You want me to go now, Kaufman? Do you want me to start my rant now?
Yeah, please. Do you feel like you need to stretch first?
I've been fighting people all week, and it drives me nuts. And it was really more after game 1 that drove me crazy when people said that Tatum didn't have a great game. The one thing that I think as basketball fans, we need to learn how to separate having a great game from not shooting the ball well, because those are 2 different things. Jason Tatum did not shoot the ball particularly well from 3-point range in game 1. He was 0 of 5. I think off the top of my head, he was 9 of 19 in that game. So if you take away the threes, he's 9 of 14 in that game from 2-point range. It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. So he didn't shoot the ball well from 3, but he shot the ball well from 2. And he also had 6 assists and 11 rebounds and 1 turnover. And he led the team. He led the team in rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. 4 out of the 5 major categories he led the team in. And so when people look at that and they say Tatum didn't have a good game, that drives me crazy. Tatum did not shoot the ball particularly well. Fair. Totally fine. I love it. I don't know about you, Greeny, personally. I don't know how you feel about this. I love it when Jason Tatum's the 3rd leading scorer on the team and they win by 25. I think that's great. I think it's wonderful because it's Tatum getting his other guys involved, making them feel like they're a part of the process and letting them make an impact on winning. Tatum, the stuff that Tatum is doing, I think is just not registering in a lot of people's brains, right? It's a Steph Curry thing. Everybody gets super enthralled and in love with the 3-point shooting of Steph Curry, and I obviously get it. They're missing a huge chunk of what makes Steph amazing. One of the biggest things is he doesn't stop moving whether he has the ball or not. And the fact that he can move and do all these things and everybody has all this attention on him wherever he is on the floor makes life easier for the other 4 guys on the court. Tatum doesn't have that type of gravity. Nobody in basketball does. Steph Curry is an alien. However, Tatum can still impact the game and still command the attention of an entire 5-man unit and make life easier for other guys. And that, to me, is better basketball because we've seen what happens when Tatum tries to take over games by himself. Sometimes it results in wins. Sometimes it results in losses. I think it's a better formula for Tatum to contribute in all areas, not just one, to help a team win a game. And this is the stuff that, Greeny, I'm sure you've gotten it. Adam, I'm sure you've gotten it. But I've gotten very sensitive to this over the past couple of days because I just can't comprehend people sitting at home saying, after game 1, Jason Tatum had a bad game. I'm just like, no, he was the leader in rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. That's a tremendous game. And he also didn't shoot the ball particularly well from 3-point range. That's fine, but this doesn't diminish these other things. And I think we're all missing that. When Tatum goes off for 33 in a road game and he's assertive from the jump, everybody's like, oh, this is the Jason Tatum we've been waiting for. It's like, he can always do this. I don't care about this part. I care about the other stuff. I care about how is Jaylen Brown playing? How is Jrue Holiday playing? How is Derek White playing? How are the other guys on the team getting involved? That's the final step for Tatum, is how he can dictate a game, whether he's shooting it or not. That's the beauty of Nikola Jokic. Jokic can dominate a game without shooting. That's a huge luxury. And the fact that people are missing that is driving me crazy. And I'm hopeful at some point, gentlemen, we can get over that. The fact that Tatum doesn't score a cajillion points a game to have a huge impact on the game. And, I'm almost sick and tired of talking about it, but somebody has to pound the table for this, and I will be that guy.
To be honest, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Like, I think it's disingenuous to think that Tatum doesn't need to be more efficient from the floor. And I think with that just comes a better approach, right? Not settling for the low quality fadeaways when maybe you could either drive to the rim or find a way to get, a mid-range shot that's, created a different way than just backing someone down and then stepping away one-legged, right? Like we all lived through the 2022 finals. Just saying, oh, it doesn't matter what Tatum shoots from the floor as long as he does other things. That's not true. Like, he rebounded well in the finals. He averaged, he had a couple of 10-assist games in that finals. At the end of the day, your number one offensive player can't shoot 40 from the floor and 22% from three. So I think anyone who's saying, hey, the Celtics can't win a title if he shoots like that, there's merit to that. Like, it's objectively not been to even his standard. Where I think it goes overboard is this assumption of, the discrediting the other factors like you mentioned, this overall narrative that he's not showing up in the playoffs, isn't a number one, isn't a dog. All that stuff is bullshit. So it's somewhere in the middle. Yes, he has to be, efficient, or at least more efficient than what we're seeing, but it's also going to require him to play the way he's playing in terms of making sure he's not forcing, getting other guys involved. But I think the biggest difference is going to be, just like we saw last night, he was much more involved as an initiator. His usage rate was way up. I think we're going to start to see Joe run with him as a creator in the pick and roll more, because when he gets downhill, who is staying in front of him? So I think there are things that Joe and the offense can do to improve his efficiency. But at the end of the day, like, he is the number one guy. We can't just pretend like his offense isn't important because it's been below his own standard. I just think we need to remember that, like you said, there are other ways to impact a basketball game. And there was a time when his shooting struggles eliminated all those areas from his game. He would not be locked in defensively. He wouldn't rebound because he would be so caught up with his shooting struggles. As he's matured, he started to block that out. And I think that is what makes all the difference.
Playoff time, there is nothing like it. I mean, the energy, the effort amps up a good 50 to 75% compared to the regular season. And that's why you want to go to Game Time, the authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA. Now, they make getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. And here's the deal with the Game Time app. The prices of those tickets go down the closer you get to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and you can also get the view from your seats with the lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So here's what you should do. You download the Game Time app and you browse it, and you can see that you can get Celtics and Bruins playoff tickets for less than $150. And again, the closer to Game Time you get, the lower the ticket price is. These are terrific deals for big-time postseason games. Last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute sports, concert, comedy, theater tickets. All in pricing. Toggling this feature shows that the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and also the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. So, take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS and get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Guys, we've been going for a little while. I don't want us to go too much longer, so all due respect to Drew Holiday. You were awesome in Game 3. We just don't have time tonight. So hopefully you will continue to impress us and we can talk about you next week. What I want to make sure, in the interest of time, that we work in is the projecting ahead. I know that Greeny, you don't want to look ahead to the conference.
Nope, not doing it.
And you don't have to do it. You can do
You can't put that on me.
I'll tell you what you can do. You can do it in hypotheticals because, Ev, you know this. I have been driving the bus for weeks on this show, talking about how we have been heading to a Celtics-Knicks conference finals. It's like a collision course for it. No doubt in my mind. Well, I'll tell you what. After what we saw in Game 3, even though it was a close Knicks loss, and in Game 4, where they lost by 1 billion points to the Pacers, I am ready to change my tune. I actually am starting to think the Pacers are going to win this series. Not because I think Indiana is the better team. I just think
10 guys.
I just think that it's twofold, right? It's the way Tibbs coaches, which has gotten him a lot of success. It's gotten into a lot of trouble over the years as well. That he runs his guys into the ground, and has 6 guys on that roster that he even kind of trusts right now, with OG out, Robinson out, Randall out, Bogdanovich out. Like maybe OG returns, but he's got to start Precious now. He's got to give meaningful minutes to McBride. Like this is a problem for the Knicks. And yeah, these guys finally got a break today because their asses were getting beaten so bad that Tibbs couldn't justify putting them on the floor after the third quarter, and that maybe that helps them. They are 2-point favorites looking at it in their next game on Tuesday night, but I'm starting to believe that the Knicks at this point in time, again, it's not that the Pacers are better. The Knicks are just out of gas, man. They don't have the manpower, the bodies to keep up for the rest of this series. I think the Pacers are going to win this one. Tell me, is it better, Greeny, if the Knicks somehow find a way just because they are so depleted? What is the more advantageous situation for the Celtics right now?
I think it would have to be the Knicks, right? Just because I don't know. I'm not really all that confident in OG's hamstring magically healing to a level to where he can be just as effective. And I think they are such a completely different team with him in the lineup. And you're seeing it in this series, right? They don't have the perimeter defense. The pace so that the Pacers play with it's too fast. At the end of the day, for teams that have short rotations and injuries, it's just a bad matchup for them without OG in the lineup. From a Celtics perspective, I don't know if the Knicks have enough 3-point shooting, especially if DiVincenzo is going to maybe come back down to earth a little bit. Josh Hart is on this rookie of the year, movie run where he ruined his wrist and it turned him into a 40% 3-point shooter. So that's kind of crazy. It's crazy. I think it was Fred Katz who tweeted it out. He was like, when it happened, he said to Brunson, he's like, hey, I felt something in my wrist. I can shoot threes now. And ever since then, he's been a 40% shooter, which is basically rookie of the year. But
just hot ice, just a little bit of ice is what it is.
And so I think there are challenges that the Knicks present in terms of defense and offensive rebounding. I mean, they're tough. But I just think it's going to come down to exhaustion and available bodies. And then especially OG. I think out of all the names you mentioned, OG is he's the needle mover for that team. With him, I think they're 23-5. Without him, they're, I think, floating around under 500 or right around 500. He's such a dynamic player for them and how they play. I would say the best case scenario is it goes 7 and the Knicks pull it through. Because I think if you get this Pacers team that's going to start feeling that momentum, that plays fast, that can shoot in bunches, you're going to have Aaron Nesmith on a revenge tour for the ages. I just think there are more problems, even though their defense is worse, they present more problems for you than a banged up, shorthanded Knicks team, even with all the energy and the effort. It's easy to match effort. Once the effort, it's similar to the Isaiah Thomas Celtics years, right? When the Celtics were dominating through those regular seasons, it's because they played harder than everybody every single night. But once you get into a playoff series and you're matching energy and intensity, it comes down to talent and it comes down to execution. And I just think they're snake bit. It sucks, but that's the playoffs.
I want to salute the Knicks for being one of the most entertaining TV shows on right now. this whole playoffs run, every game with the exception of like game 4 has been awesome. Every Knicks game has been unbelievable. They're all super close. A lot of swings both ways. It's been tremendous. But yeah, I mean, if the Celtics were sitting here picking their opponent, they would pick the Knicks. And that's only because I don't know what OG looks like. I was on Barrett's show a while back, and we talked about who the team you're most afraid of in the East is. And some people picked Philly, some people picked the Bucks, and I picked the Knicks because the Knicks play hard as hell. But unlike, and this is at a time where Chris Middleton wasn't Chris Middleton quite yet because he had a pretty decent playoff run. The Knicks had the only guy that could guard Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown with OG Anunoby. Like he can guard. Like he's as good as it gets as a perimeter defender, and he can switch up and down your lineup. Neither team at left has anybody like that. So like it's if you had to pick your poison, it's the Knicks because they don't have anybody on their roster. And Jalen Brunson, who's awesome. And again, every night you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy's gonna do this again, but he does it again. He still would play them. I mean, Hardenstein is awesome. He plays his ass off. Josh Hart plays his ass off. Dante DiVincenzo looks like Klay Thompson. It's a fun team, but at the end of the day, tired legs, man. I've seen it. We've all seen it. With tired legs, you're just worn down, and you can't play like Josh Hart. I think it was the end of the Philly series, beginning of the Pacers series, was averaging 48.5 minutes per game, which last time I checked is only 48 minutes in a game. So he was playing more than 48 minutes game somehow, a couple of overtime games. So like I can't believe he's still standing. So, you know, if somebody comes out of this thing, if the Knicks somehow come out of it, if you're Boston, you're thrilled. But if, you know, the Pacers come out of it too, you know, I wouldn't be upset about it. I mean, they can clearly make the math problem favor them. Like they're an offensive, their offensive sets. I can't believe how many easy looks they get. Like it's almost, I honestly don't understand sometimes. All of a sudden they have an easy layup, and I'm like, how did this happen? And the other side, they don't play any defense at all. Like that, they don't even. They're like agnostic about defense. Nope, it doesn't even exist. Who plays defense? Who cares? So I feel like Boston could, you know, easily manipulate their way to some wins too. So I don't know how that will ultimately go. I think Boston will win, but if you had to pick one, New York City.
It goes back to like what we were saying at the beginning. To beat the Celtics, you have to be able to hit your threes at a pretty high clip. I would trust the Pacers to do that over the Knicks. It's a similar discussion we just had heading into this round of who you would want to play between the Magic and the Cavs. The Magic, a tough, good size, good defense, plays with energy, but they can't shoot. The Cavs, while they have their issues, are much more capable of exploding offensively, getting hot from three, which we saw in game 2. It's very similar between the Knicks and the Pacers. So it's sort of like a pick your poison. I tend to go with the team that can't really shoot, knowing that for the Celtics to lose, a team has to make 12 plus threes and shoot it at over 40%. And I don't think the Knicks can do that 4 out of 7 times. Whereas, you know, Halliburton has torched any variation of the Celtics that they've had with terms of perimeter defenders. He gets up to play the Celtics. I just think there are more ways that the Pacers can beat you offensively than the Knicks. And it's going to come down to who can score more points at the end of the day. And I just don't think New York can get there.
Look, Celtics, one game at a time, one series at a time. But sometimes it is fun to get into the bigger picture conversations. Is what we do here on the show. But really what we need you to do is do your part. Go out and win game 4. Go up 3-1 in this series. Inch your way closer to a series win. Make us all look smart for even having the conversation. And then, you know, again, we can revisit. You know, at this point in time, I'm guessing, just sort of doing our math, odds are our next show is going to be at the conclusion of this series. Unless, of course, the Cavs, you know, really stretch this thing out. But again, hopefully that doesn't happen. So we will be previewing that next opponent. Hopefully we get a long Knicks-Pacers series. I will ask you guys very quickly before we go, do you expect the Pacers to come back and beat the Knicks? Are you with me on that logic that I outlined? Or do you think that ultimately, I'll start with you, the Knicks win?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that ultimately, Ev, I'll start with you, the Knicks win?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that ultimately, Ev, I'll start with you, the Knicks win?
I'm going to pick the Knicks. It's a special season for them. It's been a real fun ride. I've enjoyed a lot of what they put out there on the floor, and I'm going to ride with them until they're done. I think it goes 7. I think the Knicks win game 7 at home. I think the Knicks fans are going to be all over this. It's going to be great, but I'm going to take the Knicks. I think it's a special year for them.
Bing bonging all around Times Square. What about you, Greeny?
Can I assume that Jalen Brunson's foot, like he's playing, right? Like he's not.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm gonna ride with Evan. I'm gonna go Knicks in 7, but it would not surprise me if it ends up being Pacers in 7. Because I think the Knicks take care of home in game 5. I think the Garden carries them. Like they're such a tired team. You need that home court, jolt. And then I think the Pacers do the same thing. They serve, they hold serve, and then game 7, anything can happen. I want to lean to the home team just based on NBA history, but we've seen in recent years, road teams can go on in someone's building and win a game 7. But at the end of the day, I also think, it wouldn't surprise me if there's some Tony Brothers situations towards the back half of this series. But, unless they can figure out a way to maintain their pace, it could be Pacers in 6, let alone 7. But I think you have to still, until proven otherwise, give the Knicks the edge.
All right, and equally fast before we wrap up, and Ev, once again, I will start with you. I just find the West to be far more compelling than the East. What does the Western Conference Finals look like? Who against who?
Denver, Dallas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Green, you agree?
Yeah, I think OKC is learning that you got to go through your playoff scars before you're ready for that first leap. This is obviously their first time in it. I think Kyrie's been playing great. Luka's not even shooting the ball, and they're getting an out of body experience from PJ Washington. I think this is a Western Conference type team, especially if they can defend. And now that the Nuggets are alive, I think Minnesota just blew their chance. And, until someone knocks out the champs, I think we're still on pace for a Boston-Denver final.
Man, this is a whole other conversation another time, which we just won't do it now because we've already been going almost an hour. But I will just say, and I don't know if you guys do agree with this, because I'm inclined to agree. I think Denver, while it seemed unpredictable at the time that they could win 4 out of 5 after falling down 0-2 as they did, I'm with you. Riding the momentum, I think the Nuggets are going to get it done. Of these 4 teams remaining in the West, even still, and I would say this if Minnesota was up 3-1, even still, there is just no team, as a Celtics fan, that scares me more in the West in an NBA Finals matchup than the Nuggets. So
yeah.
I love the idea of Minnesota knocking Denver out just to prevent that potential Freddy Krueger from paying Boston a visit. But I'm inclined to agree. I think that's what we're going to see, which is what people have been waiting for all season anyway.
I want to make a quick point before we get out of here. Celtics are currently 3-0 on the road this postseason, and I want to point out one more thing. In every win they've had this postseason, the opponent has shot scored under 100 points.
Under 100 points, yeah, 6 of 8. Yep.
That is given today's NBA. That's extremely. And I know they're playing Miami and the Cavs. Totally get it. Don't care. Still impressive.
You still have to go out and do it. You still have to hold them to under 100, and I don't know how many more times that'll happen, but if they win the title, it'll be on the back of their defense, not their shooting.
I mean, they'd probably be holding opponents below 90 if Joe Mazzulla wasn't such a shitty coach.
Listen, now I'm going to get upset. Okay. I'm going to get upset.
Yeah. For Dan Greenberg, Barstool Greeny, get him on Twitter at Stool Greeny. Of course, Evan Valenti, I am Adam Kaufman. We will talk to you again next week, previewing the conference finals. Yeah, you heard me. See ya.